Welcome to the Mentally Fit Athlete. I'm Dr. Jason Von Steets, a clinical sports psychologist.
I'm Lydia Garcia, a clinical social worker specialized in working with athletes from high school to master's level and everything in between.
And this podcast is all about exploring the mental side of sport in a way that's informal, practical, and maybe even a little experimental. Let's get into it.
It's great.
All right. That's
Cool. We
gold.
did it. Let's go. Let's go. We're going to get a Webby or whatever.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mentally Fit Athlete. My name is Lydia Garcia. I'm here with Dr. Jason Von Steets, and today we're talking about some common myths around sports psychology.
All right. Sounds exciting. I'm looking forward to this. Yeah, there are a lot of myths, so I think this will be really helpful for our athletes and performers to hear about.
Yeah. What were some of the myths that you thought about psychology when you were an athlete?
Oh wow, yeah. Let's see. Well, that was a long time ago.
I know. I'm trying.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think too about like what were the things that people used to say, or
yeah,
like what were some of the like what were some little things? I remember there being so much talk about like um, you know success or winning is it's 80% mental, 20% physical, like
sure,
that
yeah,
whole thing. What do you think
yeah.
about that one? Do you think that the 80-20 rule is still true?
Well, that's a really interesting question. It's it's true when it is, and it's not when it's not. So, what I mean is, it kind of varies. Like when the competition is really far away, and there's not a lot of pressure on athletes. Maybe like in preseason or spring training or whenever it is when it's far away, then athletes are training, working hard, having fun. Everybody thinks that they're going to be the champion. Everybody thinks their team is going to break records, go all the way, all that stuff. Uh, so when it's far away, then there's not that much of a mental issue for the most part. And then as you get closer and closer to the season, then people start to have some doubts. It starts to become more real for them. And then it starts to become much more mental. And then that continues as time goes on. And then once the competition is, the next night, then there's really nothing you can do. And you've already done all of your training, you've already watched film, you've already worked on technique, and all you can do is just get a good night of sleep and then be ready tomorrow. So then that's when it's like really mental. That's when it's just you and your thoughts, and you have to be able to tolerate that discomfort, tolerate those doubts, and maybe not get a good night of sleep, maybe hardly get any sleep if it's a really big competition and you're really nervous about it. Um, so
That's
so then the night before it becomes very mental.
that's really interesting because I think that it's pulling in this idea of when it's really far out and you're training for something, it does feel like you have forever. You have
Hmm.
all these, it's all right if you miss one workout. It's okay if you're late to practice that one day. It's all right if you um, if you didn't do strength training when you were supposed to, things like that, taking the
Right.
little shortcuts. It feels that way when a piece of training is really when a competition is really far out. And then I could imagine that as it gets closer, if enough of those things have built up, then an athlete might start to doubt themselves that maybe they should have done more in those times when they slept in or when they took an extra nap. And so, do you think that sports psychology or working with the sports psychologist is only for those athletes who might consider themselves a little bit mentally weak because maybe they can't keep up in those ways.
Mm. That is something that people often think, or at least in the past, that was one of the stigmas around sports psychology and mental health in general. That if you need help, it's because you're mentally weak. If and also if you have missed practices here and there, or if you feel like you haven't done every little thing that you can building up to season or postseason. But then in reality, people have whole lives. They have complete lives outside of competition. So then I would have to wonder, when an athlete is being really hard on themselves for skipping a practice because they were sick, or because they were mentally burnt out, or because they had a family obligation, is that really mentally weak, or is that really irresponsible, or are they just people who have lives outside of sport? And it's probably that they actually needed some time to mentally recover, or they needed to spend time with family, or else they're just going to get burnt out. So it's important to take care of their whole lives, especially outside of sport. And then, as far as sports psychology being for people who are mentally weak, well, mentally weak is kind of a judgmental, unhelpful term, and uh, it's just not helpful to think of things in that way. Thinking of an athlete, or thinking of yourself as mentally weak for having doubts, for having anxiety, for you know, you know, maybe needing some help from time to time. That's just being human. And then when people aren't admitting to having doubts and anxiety, then they're probably lying to other people, or they're probably lying to themselves and just pushing
Mhm.
it deep down. And so sports psychology is definitely helpful for everybody, and even elite athletes who um, would be considered mentally tough. Sports psychology can still give those athletes, maybe a 2% advantage by putting in that work to help their focus, or to help their mental resiliency, or whatever else it is.
So I heard something interesting the other day. Well, I didn't hear it. I saw it on
Sure.
social media because that's our lives now.
Yeah.
But I saw an athlete post that she she won't go to therapy because she went to a therapist once, and all of a sudden she started working through her traumas,
Mm.
and then she lost her edge
Mm.
when she was competing.
Sure.
So I know, that is a giant myth, right?
Yeah.
So, but can you share a little bit with our listeners about how mental health or seeking support, seeking therapy is not a handicap, or that's not
Sure.
the word I should use in this, right? Let's say, I'm going to say, can you share with our listeners how seeking mental health, seeking support from a therapist can be an advantage to one's
Yeah.
athletic and competitive efforts?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I would. It would be interesting to learn more about what that athlete was going through, and her experience in competition following therapy. But in general, every athlete will, have anxiety from time to time. Every athlete will have. Most people, or many people, go through a depression at one point in their life. And one way that I like to think about it is that if you're an athlete or a performer of some kind, and you get what we usually think of as a physical injury, like a pulled muscle, twist your knee, whatever it is, well, you want to go to physical therapy, and you want to address that issue. And then once you're recovered, then you can go back to strength and conditioning. But you really need to address that physical issue, and you wouldn't think of it as um, making you weaker, and you wouldn't think of the physical injury as being your source of motivation that makes you a better athlete. You would just recover, you would just resolve that issue, and then go back to doing strength and conditioning. And the same is, in my opinion, in my experience, the same is typically true of mental health issues. You can go to therapy, you can address that issue, and then you can get back to focusing on other mental skills, like maybe visualization or positive self-talk. But it is really helpful to address that mental health issue. And
Absolutely. Or maybe even just being able to focus then on the exercise, on the work,
sure.
on actually doing strength training or whatever skill it is that you're working on athletically to its fullest potential without the distraction of maybe the mental component, the
Yeah,
trauma, the worry, the anxiety that's kind of like sitting in the back of your mind.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's always hard to say. There's so many factors. So if this person did go to therapy and then felt like they lost some kind of competitive edge, it's really hard to say that it was because she addressed a mental health issue. It could be just regular passage of time. It could be uh, just kind of aging out of sport, or it could be the competition got a little bit
More
better.
intense. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's always hard to say
There's
that.
so many more factors, right?
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. And maybe that's the one of the ways that like influencers perpetuate myths or
Mm,
stereotypes about mental health or sports psychology too, like as much as therapy is becoming a little bit more accepted. And we can just see like in the Olympic trials, just I think last night, 2 nights ago, Simone Biles was talking about her standing appointment with her therapist every
yeah.
Thursday. And
Mm,
that's great for therapy and great for not just therapy, but great for the everyday person to recognize that this isn't something that makes you weaker. It's something that makes you stronger. Um, and even with kind of those messages, there continues to be a little bit of the stigmatization of mental health itself.
yeah, and it's going to take time. And if Simone Biles said every week she goes to a physical therapist, then people would think, "Oh, that's great. Maybe I should do that." And it's really good that she's saying she's being very open about her mental health and seeing a therapist. And then there are a percentage of people who would judge her for that, but then there's also other people who will see that as a positive and maybe feel understood themselves, and then seek out help because they heard that she did that.
So, can we infer? Do you think that since Simone Biles is the goat,
Sure.
she's the greatest athlete ever? Does that mean that if if like all of us start seeing a sports psychologist for our sports performance, that we're all going to become instantly winners?
Yes. No. It would be that'd be really
Will we
nice. That'd
all
be
be like Simone?
yeah, I mean that would be amazing. No, unfortunately, sports psychology does not guarantee wins, and a lot of times people are looking for that competitive edge. That oftentimes they're looking for something kind of outside of themselves. Maybe I'll try Chinese medicine like Michael Phelps, and I'm not saying that that doesn't help, but that doesn't mean you're going to be Michael Phelps. Or maybe people will try to do some kind of good luck routine that their favorite athlete does. I can't remember. There was a baseball player who would eat like a whole chicken before every game. Uh,
Wow. So,
yeah.
well, he's
So I guess
definitely got his protein for the day.
yeah, yeah. So there are these things that people often look for outside of themselves to try to guarantee some kind of outcome. Um, but the answer isn't going to be outside. Sports psychology can definitely help. It can help you to uh, you know, have a more helpful athletic process, have a more helpful mindset that gives you a better chance of getting the outcome that you want. But it doesn't guarantee a victory.
Okay. Well, I guess that kind of seems like, well, it seems like people should know that already. Like it should be common sense, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
Mhm.
Duh. Like it takes the work. There's a lot of different factors that come in
Yeah.
to creating a high performing athlete. Um, what are some of the things that an athlete would learn through through sports psychology, through working with a sports psychologist?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, good. There's so much. There's so much. I mean, the term mental toughness, to go back to that for a second, in the literature, it has a bunch of definitions, and it kind of just means anything that helps in a lot of ways. Yeah, and then when you go to see a sports psychologist, I mean, or go to get some kind of sports psychology help. Um, that's also a really broad thing. So uh, APA Division 47, the division that um, uh, talks about sports psychology. I forget what it's called actually, like the Society for Sport and Performance or something. They
Okay.
define sports psychology as uh, helping athletes to uh, perform in the upper range of their abilities and to better perform or to better enjoy their sport. So it could be a lot of things. It could be dealing with mental health issues that get in the way of their performance, or that get in the way of their enjoyment of their sport or performance, or it could be working on really helpful mental skills like focus, communication, um, visualization, self-talk, like the way that you think about things. So there's all kinds of things that sports psychology could help with, or that you could do when you're doing the sports psychology work with a provider.
Okay. So, I mean, that sounds great because I'd imagine, like we kind of said a little bit earlier, like all of those things, all of that noise
Yeah,
that might be just sort of external of the activity that you're supposed to focus on, being able to really quiet some of those things or just kind of turn the volume down a little bit so that you can catch the ball when you're
yeah,
supposed to, so that you can react in the amount of time, in the quickest amount of time that you need to, or whatever. Um, it sounds like um, working with the therapist helps to just reframe some of those things.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it just helps you to. Well, I guess you could say mindset. People like the word mindset. Helps you to have a mindset where you can just perform to the best of your ability on that day, and that always changes every day, but to perform your best on that day and to enjoy things more. And even if it's just enjoying things more, I do think that's worth it.
Yeah, the enjoying things more. We should cover that one day.
Sure.
How athletes, yeah, like the enjoyment of sport and what kind of changes that, right? So stay tuned
Yeah.
for the next episode when we
Sure.
talk about the enjoyment of sport.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Are there any other myths that you would want to dispel around sports
Let's see.
psychology before we wrap up for today?
Sure. Yeah. One other myth is just that sports psychology is common sense, and someone might hear a little bit about what you might do in sports psychology, positive self talk, breathing, and then just think, oh, that's easy. Of course, I already know how to do that. I don't need to work with somebody and get sports psychology help. Well, pe- it might sound pretty easy and pretty straightforward, and in some ways it kind of is. But these things are a lot easier said than done. Usually, when the pressure is on, uh, all of the confidence and the positive self talk that somebody had could very easily fly out the window, and they can very easily start holding their breath and just gritting their teeth and trying to power through the moment. And sometimes that can help, sometimes that can work, but usually it just ends up with really sloppy bad performance. uh, so even though sports psychology might seem like common sense, it does take a lot of work. There's a lot of evidence-based approaches, a lot of evidence-based exercises that can be really helpful. That could save somebody a lot of time versus hitting their head against a wall and just trying to power through the moment over and over again. And a lot of times things seem like common sense after the fact. Um, After you already know something, it seems like common sense. Uh, for example, there's something called the fixed mindset, where an athlete, will think that they're just born gifted, they're naturally talented, and and they're a winner. And you might think, oh, well, that's the mindset that an athlete needs to have. But then what we find through research is that when somebody has that, what we call the fixed mindset, because they think that natural talent is a fixed entity, uh, they actually shy away from challenges, and they can respond really poorly to setbacks. And it's not necessarily great for performance. And then when somebody has a growth mindset, that means that they think that ability is something that grows through effort and learning. Then that athlete is going to be more likely to challenge themselves, to work really hard, and to bounce back from setbacks. Um, and then in reality, the research does show that elite athletes have a combination of a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, where they think that they're naturally gifted and that they're the best athlete, but then they also know that they need to work hard to grow their talent and their ability. Things are more complicated than just say fixed mindset or growth mindset, but it does kind of go against common sense that an athlete should just think that they're God's gift to sport and have all the confidence in the world, because in reality, when they think that and then they face a setback, then they crumble when they have that mindset. So the
Yeah,
growth mindset, just knowing that it takes hard work and effort and ability can grow through time, is really key.
that's amazing. That's great because I'm just thinking about like, an athlete who maybe they're just coming up short. They've missed that catch. Um, they lost to their rival in a race. They came in fourth and didn't make the Olympic team.
Hmm.
Something like that. Just when you're at that level, there's so many eyes on you, and there just must be so much pressure. And we look at our elite and professional athletes as if they are um, impermeable to
Hmm.
criticism, but they aren't. And they're just like the rest of us, who like
Yeah,
if something goes wrong, um, maybe we're not performing at our best, and that could be in sport, or that could be in something in everyday life, in our job, and in anything, right?
right.
Um, yeah,
Yeah,
we
and
all
a lot of times a lot of times these elite athletes are just kids. They're teenagers or they're in their early 20s. And Ken Reviza, a pioneer in the field of sports psychology, would say, a lot of the Major League Baseball players, a lot of the Olympic athletes that he worked with, uh, they had a special talent and they were really good at their sport and they worked really hard, but they're still human. So they
yeah
still go through all the mental challenges that everybody else does. They have self doubt. They wake up thinking, maybe I should just quit. Why am I even doing this? I'm sacrificing so much. What if I'm a fraud? So they're really good at sports, but then they're also usually like 20,
yeah
and and they have all the self doubt that the rest of us have.
and their brain hasn't finished developing.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's true.
Mhm. Right. Well, I think this was a great place for us to get started, a great way for us to kick off some of our discussion around sports psychology, and having having a fit mindset. So I'm looking forward to more conversations like this with you.
Yeah,
We're going to be meeting to discuss more ways to make you the best mentally fit athlete that you can be, and
yeah.
can't wait to share with you.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Awesome, yeah. And then, do you should we share our contact info? Do you want to tell people about your
Yeah.
website or your social media handle?
The best place to find me is on social media at Liddy G, Liddie.G on Instagram. That's the best way to find me.
Awesome. Yeah, and then you can find me on Instagram at CBT Sports Psych. I'm on Twitter too, or X. Hardly ever post there. I'm kind of on Threads. And then you can find my website, drjasonvonseats.com. We'll put all this in the show notes. And this is awesome. Looking forward to doing it again.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye.